edition of 8Sports Nightcap here on WRIC.now.com, on our Facebook, on our YouTube. Thanks so much for tuning in. We're back. We had a couple of weeks off because of the holidays, but happy to be back on a regular scheduled programming here. It's a busy time of year for the world of sports. Bowl season's wrapped up. We got a couple of big college football semifinal games coming up here this week. And then, of course, basketball kind of takes center stage once the college football playoffs come to an end. But thanks so much for tuning in. If you've not tuned in to an 8Sports Nightcap before, welcome. Back here to the 8Sports Nightcap. It's kind of a recap show of what happened the week prior, preview of what's happening this week, and just kind of talking a little bit of ball. And we got a pretty busy slate of things to talk about. Kind of want to put a bow on bowl season to put in a little alliteration there. But we'll start with the Virginia Tech Hokies. The 2025 Duke's Mayo Bowl is finished, and the Hokies did not have the end to the year that they were probably hoping for. Of course, they entered this game as 2-touchdown underdogs, and they end up losing this game by 2 touchdowns, 24-10 in Charlotte at Bank of America Stadium. I had some friends that went out to the game. They had great things to say about the matchup, and they seemed pretty excited about the turnout that was there. I know it was really, really cold out there at Bank of America Stadium. For those of you that went out there, congratulations. You survived, but I'm sure you weren't happy with the product that you saw on the field from Virginia Tech. When talking about this game, you, of course, have to talk about the transfers and where bowl season is in terms of who's playing, who's opting out. Virginia Tech had a couple of healthy scratches that opted out of the bowl game, which I was kind of surprised to see. I feel like these bowl games are another opportunity to build your draft stock and not hurt it. And so I was kind of surprised to see Antoine Powell-Ryland not play in this game. He was one of those guys that opted out, for NFL draft reasons. But besides for him, there were 14 players on Virginia Tech's roster that played against UVA that did not play in the bowl game. I mean, that's 2/3 of the starters, right, that didn't play in the bowl game. Granted, Minnesota were without 7 of their starters, so it's not, a complete reason why they lost. I think the reason why they lost this game is because the offense struggled to move the ball, just 223 yards on the day. Minnesota was able to move the ball with ease over Virginia Tech. The defense actually played pretty well in this game, I think, despite the fact that they currently don't have a defensive coordinator. Kind of look at some of the stats here. Both Colin Schlee and Pop Watson played. I think the ball moved a little better when Colin Schlee was at quarterback, but, Pop Watson's going to be back next year. Colin Schlee's not. And so I'm not that surprised that Brent Pry and company decided not to play Colin Schlee a little bit more in this game, considering that Pop Watson will be back in Blacksburg next year. When you look at the rushing stats, I found that was pretty interesting. That Keelan Adams trick play, when that went for 47 yards, was that was their leading rusher. Tyler Mason had the second most rushes in this game. He only got 33 yards. Coney only got 30 yards on his carries as well. Coney was kind of all over the place. He's a Richmond guy. He had 7 receptions for just 10 yards. So they kind of had a hard time moving the ball down the field. And it really was just this lackluster, clunky game for Virginia Tech. And they've now lost 5 of their last 6 bowl games. Of course, last year against Tulane was their lone winner. And that was kind of the reason that everyone was so excited about this Virginia Tech team, right? From last year, because of how well they played against Tulane, and a Tulane team that was without all of their players from a season ago. So the bowl season is so strange now. You don't know how much you want to, take away from a loss, but when a team wins, you want to take everything away and talk about how great it was. If anything, at the end of the day, we got to see, of course, the Minnesota head coach get Mayo dunked on his head, and what was, the big surprise and fun of the game. We got a nice cameo from Flavor Flav as well. He was the Duke's mascot. But at the end of the day, the Hokies finished their season 6-7. It's a losing season. It's, now they've only have I think 3 losing seasons in the past 28, 29 years or something. And last season was one. What's interesting about Virginia Tech, since the bowl game has happened, it's like they put all their efforts towards transfers in the portal, and I was kind of surprised they didn't do more of that heading into the Mayo Bowl, because since the bowl game has happened, Virginia Tech has had 4 or 5 Power 5 transfers to their schools. A couple of West Virginia offensive linemen have committed. To this afternoon, a Hampton native that went to Phoebus transferred in from Pittsburgh, and they had a big signing out of an FCS school yesterday as well. So the Hokies making some moves on the transfer portal, but it was a disappointing end of their season. They fall to Minnesota 24-10. Turning our attention now to a little Liberty football. Kind of same situation, right? They went down to the Bahamas for the Bahamas Bowl. It was the last regular bowl game of the year, so they kind of got a primetime slot early on Saturday morning when they took on Buffalo. This Liberty team without a lot of their starters. Of course, Jamie Chadwell in his second year at Liberty was trying to do something that the Flames have never done, and that was win at least 9 or more games in one season. They had 8 wins going into the matchup against Buffalo, but without their starting quarterback, they struggled to move the ball. Look at the two stats there for the quarterbacks. Ryan Berger, 4 for 12. Nate Hampton, 2 for 9 with 1 touchdown, which was basically his entire 40 yards, and then he threw a pick 6 as well. So just a clunky offense for Liberty. Of course, their starting quarterback from the season has transferred to Buffalo to try to replace Shedeur Sanders. We'll see if he does that, but Liberty ends their season 8-5. Second straight bowl game loss for them. Last year, you might remember, they actually were the last group of 5 school, right, to make it to a New Year's Six bowl. They played Oregon on the road. I think it was the Fiesta Bowl. They struggled in that game as well. So bowl season hasn't been kind to Liberty, despite how great their regular season has been, and their leading rusher was Berger in that one as well. Not too much to take away from that, considering the fact that the Flames were without a lot of their talent. I think you can even take less away because it was the quarterback that wasn't there, whereas Virginia Tech, of course, we'd seen Pop Watson play. We'd seen Colin Schlee play, so it wasn't as strange that Virginia Tech it wasn't as strange that Liberty struggled so much because they had these 2 guys in that hadn't really played all season. All right, how about we talk a little college hoops, and then we'll get into some NFL football. I want to turn our attention first to let's go to our browser here. The VCU Rams, they'll be back in action tomorrow, pending this water thing doesn't get in the way of of their game tomorrow against Fordham. Right now, it's still on. I've talked with the officials over there. They say they're going to monitor the situation. If anything's affected, it looks like concessions might be, and that would be the only thing really affected. I'm not sure how the water in the bathroom works or whatever the case is for that. But currently, what they've told us is that they're still planning to play this game tomorrow at 7 o'clock. And what's interesting about this game for VCU tomorrow is that they're coming off of a huge win over Loyola Chicago. A 19-point win after the Rams had lost 2 out of 3. They went on that road trip to New Mexico and lost to the Lobos, and then they had their first A-10 game. They played St. Bonaventure and lost a 1-possession game. And as you can see here by the A-10 standings, St. Bonaventure is 14-1 this season. How they're not ranked, I don't know. They've been playing great basketball. That's the lone A-10 loss for VCU. I know a lot of people were kind of freaking out after they lost to St. Bonaventure on New Year's Eve, 77-75. But look, the Bonnies have only lost 1 game. It was a 1-possession game on the road. I don't think you need to sound the alarm just yet, especially after how well VCU played in that second half. They outscored the Ramblers 47-25 in the second half the other night. Philip Russell, I think he had 5 threes, finished with 25 points. Ferrum had 14. Zeb Jackson, 11. 12 points for Jack Clark. This is a deep VCU team. Joe Bamisill didn't even play that well, and he's kind of been the flag bearer for this team this season. Max Shula didn't play that good, and he's kind of been the flag bearer for this Richmond team. So because they got that win back on the road against Loyola Chicago, I think you can kind of feel better about this VCU team. The next 2 games, I think, will say a lot. Fordham, not a great team. They're 8-7 on the year. They've lost both of their A-10 games, one of which was to Richmond, and then they'll take on a St. Louis team who, of course, is always pretty good. St. Louis this year, I'm not sure how well they're doing. I would like to take a look at that. Yeah, they're 9-6. They're not doing too great either. So far, teams look out for George Mason, St. Joseph, Dayton, George Washington, Rhode Island, all looking pretty good in the A-10. It's a deep conference. I feel like they kind of fell under the radar after they lost some of those non-conference games that I think A-10 fans were expecting them to win, and just hasn't really been the case. All right, turn our attention to the Richmond basketball team. They currently have a matchup on the road tomorrow, in-state matchup against George Mason. it'll be interesting to see how that one goes because Richmond has kind of turned it around. You know, they had some really bad losses this year. They lost by 18 to Florida Gulf Coast. They've lost to Marist to start the year. They have losses to William & Mary, Belmont, Auburn. They haven't played well, but they're 2-0 in 8-10 play. They're undefeated. They've beaten the two worst teams in the 18 and Fordham and UMass, but all of a sudden they kind of could put themselves into a position where maybe they could make a run in the 8-10 tournament at the end of the year if they keep winning these games. They take on a George Mason team that has 10 wins this year, and then on Saturday they'll face off at home against Rhode Island in a pretty big game. If they get a win over Rhode Island, look out. The Spiders have kind of maybe found some swagger in their steps after having a really, really hard time being able to do anything. And I mentioned that they had beat Fordham. I apologize, that's not the case. They beat George Washington, which is part of the reason why, you know, there's kind of some hype around this team that they had their biggest win of the year on New Year's Eve against George Washington. All right, let's finish things off with the Washington Commanders. Pretty quick show today. Not a lot going on currently in the world of sports between the holiday and all the local sports here today getting postponed. All the high school games yesterday kind of got postponed. We'll probably pick back up with some high school basketball later in the week. Of course, tomorrow the big storyline is VCU. But how about we get to talk about the Washington Commanders, because for just the sixth time since 2000, they are headed to the playoffs. They, of course, went to the playoffs with Taylor Heineke back in 2019, and they're going back to the playoffs. They secure the 6th seed, so they'll take on the Rams. They take down Dallas with the backup quarterback Marcus Mariota. Looked great in this game, 15 for 18, threw for 2 scores, was the leading rusher as well, rushed for a score for 56 yards. Terry McLaurin led the way at receiver. He had 8 receptions in this one. And despite being outgained by Dallas by over 100 yards, Trey Lance was kind of running things. It's this weird end-of-the-season thing, and I don't really remember it being this way when it was just 16 games that so many players would sit out. But that's kind of what we're seeing now here at the end of the year, teams sitting out players. Like the Bengals missed out on the playoffs because the Chiefs didn't play anybody. And maybe that was strategic by Kansas City, but it's been strange, especially this year, watching all these teams sit players. Washington sat players. Dallas tried out Trey Lance I'm surprised they didn't go to him sooner. I feel like you don't really know how much talent level Trey Lance really has, but he played pretty good in this game. Washington, though, comes away with the win, 23-19. It was yet another last-second win for Washington. They lead the NFL in one-score games, and they're winning those one-score games. I think they've had 3 or 4 last-second plays that have decided a win or not, but the Commanders are headed to the playoffs. Before we go, how about we actually look at the NFL schedule here for the playoffs? Kind of do a little preview of what's to come this week. So on Saturday, we got the Texans and Chargers. Texans struggling, playing a Chargers team that's been looking good. And then the Ravens and Steelers will play on Saturday. And the other wild card game, we got Broncos, Bills, Packers, Eagles, and then Commanders, Bucks, and Vikings, Rams coming up for this wild card round as well. I don't really want to give any predictions per se because it really does feel wide open. The Eagles have been playing good. If they can stay healthy, I think it's going to be hard to bet against the Eagles, but I wouldn't be surprised if some other teams make a big push as well. The Ravens, Bills, 2 teams to look for. We all know that, though. At the end of the day, the big storyline, the fact that the Commanders are in the playoffs. I think I said they play the Rams. That's not the case. They'll be playing Baker Mayfield and the Buccaneers on Sunday at 8 o'clock in Tampa Bay. So we'll see what Jaden Daniels can do in his first playoff game. And he's not the only rookie quarterback that's been impressing. Of course, Bo Nix with the Denver Broncos are also in the thick of things here for rookie quarterbacks that are playing so well. But that's going to just about wrap up things here today for 8Sports Nightcap. It was a shorter show today. We're going to try to get back to some interviews next week. Couldn't secure one today with all the hectic of the water situation we have going on in Richmond this week. But that's going to wrap things up for 8Sports Nightcap. Shorter show this week. We'll be back to regular next week as we kind of get over this holiday hangover, if you will. All right, that's going to wrap things up. See you guys next week.